Linguistic and cultural diversity is growing within the United States and is mirrored within school settings. With this diversity come growing numbers of children whose native language is not English, and who may be described as limited English proficient or English language learners. There are many acronyms to refer to these students. LEP, ELL, or EL are some common acronyms that can help you discuss these English language learners. There are very large populations of ELLs in California, New York, Texas, Illinois, Arizona, and Florida. However, these students are present to some degree in virtually every state. Some of these ELLs are immigrants and refugees, but many were born right here in the United States. Unfortunately, school dropout rates are often very high among ELL populations, and achievement gaps between ELL and non-ELL groups have been reported in many schools. However, ELLs come from heterogeneous language, cultural, and educational and socioeconomic backgrounds. The availability of bilingual education, English for speakers of other languages, English as a second language, and other special instructional programs for ELL students differ across states and school districts, and may be offered through self-contained, pull-out, bilingual, or mainstream classes. The United States experienced phenomenal growth in the number of ELs over the first decade of the 21st century, expanding the need in many public schools to provide special language instruction. According to the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, during the 1997-98 school year until the 2008-2009 school year, the number of ELs enrolled in public schools increased from 3.5 million to 5.3 million, or by 51%. Yet, during the same period, the general population of students only grew by 7.2% to 49.5 million. These huge numbers of English language learners pose unique challenges for educators striving to ensure that such students get access to both content knowledge and the English language. Achievement gaps between ELLs and non-ELL students are deeply rooted. The good news is that the NEA is actively addressing complex issues by engaging in research and advocacy and proposing strategies that we can pursue individually and collectively as a nation to improve these gaps between our students. Now you may be asking yourself, well, why is all this information so important? And here's the answer. Nationwide, only 12% of students who are limited English proficient scored at or above proficient in mathematics in the 4th grade on the 2009 National Assessment of Educational Progress, compared with 42% of students not classified as English language learners. The gap was considerably wider in 8th grade math, where 5% of ELLs were proficient or above on the 2009 NAEP, compared with 35% of non-ELLs. The math assessment is available in Spanish as well as English, but the NAEP reading test was not as of 2011. Yet this doesn't cover all of the different languages that these students speak. Only English and Spanish tests can pose many difficulties for the rest of our students. Now, on the NAEP reading test, the percentages of LEP students who reached proficient was lower than for the math test in both 4th and 8th grades. Only 3% of ELLs met that standard in 8th grade reading, compared with 34% of non-ELLs. Now, states also have to comply with provisions for English language learners stated in the No Child Left Behind Act. The most recent version of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is the federal government's flagship legislation for the K-12 education. With the enactment of that law, for the first time, school districts were required to break out and report the standardized test scores of ELLs, as well as other specified subgroups of students. School districts are required by the law to meet targets set by their states for AYP, or Adequate Yearly Progress, for English language learners and all of their other subgroups, or face sanctions. For measuring accountability, the law requires states to develop ELL proficiency standards and implement ELL proficiency tests. The English proficiency standards had to be linked to state academic standards. Regulations for the law stipulate that ELLs must be tested in math beginning with their first round of state exams, after the students who enter a U.S. school, and in reading after they've been in the U.S. school for at least 1 year. But many educators and researchers have contended that state content assessments have not been valid and reliable for ELL learners. As it has turned out, not many states have met the AYP goals for ELLs. During the 2007-2008 school year, only 11 states met their accountability goals for ELLs. Researchers point out that because states set their own goals for ELL achievement and have their own definition for ELLs, it is not possible to compare ELL performance among states. Imagine if you and your family had to move to Spain without notice. No time to study Spanish, and when you get there, you must go to school. All day you have to sit in a classroom and translate everything that is being said from Spanish to English. Constantly, all day, you must try and keep up with everyone who seems to not struggle at all with the Spanish language. Not only that, you must learn new content skills. And all of the content is being taught, of course, in Spanish. These skills that you learn are specific to math, language arts, science, and social studies. But unfortunately, your background knowledge is not similar to that of your peers because, after all, you lived in the United States and you just moved to Spain. This would become extremely trying and tiring. This is where technology can play a huge role. There are so many different types of technology that can help ELs. There are many types of software, online tools, PowerPoint, word processing, and other technologies to help students hone basic language skills that they can later apply in authentic social settings. Technology mixes things up, captures students' attention, and engages them in a way that traditional classroom instruction cannot. Each student can work on skills specific to them depending on the availability of the technology. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a comprehensive study of the technologies teachers are using to aid K-12 English language learners. But educators strongly recommend individual computer programs and other technologies because they say they accelerate the acquisition of phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and reading comprehension skills, and other language building blocks. But, as we all know, school districts do not always have the money set aside for these technologies. Yes, it would be great to have translating software, iPods with vocabulary instruction, but this is not practical. I mean, have you seen the cost of a Rosetta Stone? Now, on the plus side, most school districts have at least an internet connection. Therefore, I thought it best to share with you the plethora of websites for ELs. Internet, word processing, and presentation technologies can facilitate authentic connections to the world, and these are much easier to come by. For example, word processing allows students to write out what they are thinking. They can respond to a prompt, question, free write, and many other things. They are not put on the spot and expected to come up with an answer immediately. They can write out their thoughts, edit, and change their ideas. They can reread their writing, use spell check, and the thesaurus. This is a skill that must be taught. Now with PowerPoint, we have all these capabilities that word processing does, plus more. Inserting pictures and videos is a very special piece with PowerPoint. This allows ELs to put content with their words. This makes the ideas become concrete in their minds and eventually helps to build the background knowledge which they lack. Now, on to the internet. The internet is a great and powerful tool. Unfortunately, when not used correctly, it can be confusing and extremely difficult to navigate. Now, imagine everything in a different language. Facebook? It's in Spanish. You go check your Gmail. It's in Spanish. You just want to chat with some friends, but it's all in Spanish. Yes, what they write to you may be in English, but how can you get to access that actual conversation? You must navigate your world in Spanish. Fortunately, many web browsers now have a translate option, and this can help students who are brand new and know little to no English. This can also help scaffold the students where they have reached a point when this translation is no longer needed. Throughout this wiki, I hope to introduce you to many different websites that can help you teach your English language learners. They are all free. Some you may need to pay, but you can at least access at least some of their content for free, because I know as teachers, money is quite limited.